The room was utterly silent except for the music flowing from Marcus's fingertips. Each note seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with an intensity that left everyone breathless. Evelyn stood frozen near the piano, her arms still crossed, but her expression had shifted from skepticism to awe. The melody Marcus played wasn't just technically perfect. It was alive, brimming with emotion that reached into the deepest corners of the heart. It was as if the piano itself had come to life under his touch, telling a story only Marcus could understand. As the piece progressed, the haunting beauty of the nocturne began to draw attention beyond the recital hall. Students passing by paused mid-step, their conversations trailing off as they tried to locate the source of the mesmerizing sound. A few peeked inside, curious at first, but soon found themselves rooted to the spot, unable to tear their eyes away. Even professors and staff members who happened to be nearby stopped what they were doing, drawn like moths to a flame by the sheer power of the performance. Evelyn, too, felt herself being pulled into the music. She had always prided herself on her technical precision, her ability to execute even the most challenging pieces flawlessly. But this was something entirely different. Marcus wasn't just playing. He was pouring his soul into every note. His fingers moved with a grace that defied logic, considering how calloused and worn they appeared. There was no hesitation, no sign of rustiness, despite years of silence. It was as though the piano had been waiting for him all along, dormant until his return. Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away, unwilling to let anyone see her vulnerability. She had mocked him, dismissed him as nothing more than a janitor unworthy of touching her precious instrument. Yet here he was, proving her wrong in the most profound way possible. The realization hit her hard. This man sitting before her wasn't just someone who cleaned floors. He was a musician, perhaps one of the greatest she'd ever encountered. By the time Marcus reached the final notes of the piece, the recital hall was packed. Dozens of students, teachers, and even strangers passing through the academy had gathered outside the door or pressed against the windows, captivated by the performance. When the last chord faded into silence, there was a moment of stunned stillness. No one dared to breathe, as if afraid to break the spell. Then, applause erupted, slow at first, tentative, but quickly growing into a thunderous ovation. People clapped, cheered, and whistled, their faces glowing with admiration. Some wiped away tears, while others simply stared in disbelief. Marcus sat motionless on the bench, his hands resting gently on his lap, unsure of how to react. He hadn't expected an audience, let alone such an overwhelming response. For years he had hidden his talent, burying it beneath layers of self-doubt and regret. Now it felt surreal to have it laid bare for everyone to witness. Evelyn stepped forward, her earlier arrogance completely gone. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling, not with anger this time, but with genuine curiosity and respect. Her question echoed the thoughts of everyone in the room. How could someone with such extraordinary skill end up working as a janitor? What kind of life had led him here? Marcus hesitated, unsure where to begin. The weight of his past pressed down on him, but he knew he couldn't keep it hidden any longer. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak, his words soft but steady. "I used to play," he admitted, glancing down at his hands. "A long time ago. But life, well, it didn't turn out the way I planned." His simple explanation sent ripples through the crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire as people pieced together the fragments of his story. Here was a man who had once walked the same path as them. A dreamer, a musician, but whose journey had taken a drastically different turn. And yet, despite everything he had endured, his love for music remained unbroken, shining brightly in that single unforgettable performance. For Evelyn, the revelation struck deeper than words could express. She realized she had judged Marcus unfairly, assuming his worth based solely on his job title. In doing so, she had missed the treasure standing right in front of her. As the applause continued, Evelyn made a silent vow. She would make things right. This incredible man deserved recognition, and she would do everything in her power to ensure he received it. The applause in the recital hall slowly began to fade, but the energy in the room remained electric. Marcus sat on the piano bench, his hands still resting lightly on his lap, unsure of how to process what had just happened. He had played for himself, out of a momentary defiance and a longing to reconnect with the music he once loved. But now, surrounded by dozens of people staring at him with wide eyes and open mouths, he felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't been in years. Evelyn was the first to break the silence. Stepping closer to the piano, she knelt slightly so she could look directly into Marcus's eyes. "You didn't just use to play," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. "That wasn't just playing. It was art, pure art." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For someone like Evelyn, who lived and breathed perfection, admitting that another person's performance surpassed anything she'd ever done was no small feat. Marcus glanced at her, then quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the attention. "It's not important," he murmured, trying to downplay what had happened. That was just an old habit. But Evelyn wasn't about to let him brush it off so easily. "Not important," she echoed incredulously. "Do you have any idea how rare it is to hear someone play like that? You don't just forget something like this, Marcus. This isn't something you bury. It's who you are." Her insistence prompted others to chime in. A professor who had been standing near the door stepped forward, adjusting his glasses as if to confirm what he had just witnessed was real. "Mr. Marcus," he began, his tone formal yet warm, "I've taught music for over 30 years, and I can honestly say I've never heard anyone bring such emotion to Chopin. Would you mind telling us more about your background?" Marcus hesitated, his fingers nervously fidgeting with the edge of his uniform shirt. He didn't want to talk about his past. It was painful, full of memories he had worked hard to lock away. But the sincerity in the professor's voice, and the genuine curiosity radiating from everyone around him, made it impossible to refuse. Taking a deep breath, Marcus began to share fragments of his story. He told them about growing up in a modest household where music became his escape. His parents, though poor, scraped together enough money for lessons when they saw how naturally gifted he was. By his early 20s, he was performing in small venues and competitions, earning praise from critics and mentors alike. "They said I had potential," Marcus recalled, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Said I could make it big if I kept going." But life, as it often does, threw obstacles in his path. When his father fell ill, Marcus gave up touring to take care of him, working odd jobs to cover medical bills. Then, during one particularly grueling shift at a construction site, an accident left his dominant hand injured. The damage wasn't severe enough to completely disable him, but it robbed him of the fine motor control required for professional piano playing. Devastated, he walked away from music entirely, unable to face the reminders of what he had lost. As Marcus spoke, the room grew quieter still. No one interrupted him, not even Evelyn, whose earlier arrogance seemed like a distant memory. Instead, she listened intently, her arms uncrossed and her posture relaxed, a sign of respect few would have expected from her. When Marcus finished, there was a collective exhale from the crowd. It was clear that his journey had been one of immense sacrifice and resilience, and while some might have seen his current position as a janitor as a fall from grace, those listening understood it differently. They saw a man who had endured unimaginable hardships, yet carried himself with dignity and humility. Evelyn broke the silence again, her voice firm but kind. "This can't be the end of your story," she said, addressing Marcus directly. "You deserve more than this. Everyone here deserves to hear you play again, not just tonight, but everywhere, on stages, in concerts, wherever music lies." Her words sparked murmurs of agreement throughout the room. The professor nodded enthusiastically, already jotting notes on a scrap of paper. "We need to do something," he declared. "An event, a showcase, something to honor your talent properly." For the first time in years, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Though he wasn't ready to fully embrace the idea of stepping back into the spotlight, he couldn't deny the warmth spreading through his chest. These people, students, teachers, even Evelyn, were offering him something he hadn't dared to dream of: a second chance. The grand concert hall was bathed in soft golden light as Marcus stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding like a drum. The applause from the audience was thunderous, yet it felt distant to him, almost surreal. He had spent years avoiding attention, content to remain invisible, but now he stood under the spotlight, wearing a borrowed suit that fit perfectly and carried the weight of everyone's expectations. For a moment, he hesitated, his hands hovering near the piano keys, unsure if he could rise to the occasion. Evelyn, seated in the front row alongside the Academy's directors, gave him an encouraging nod. Her earlier arrogance was nowhere to be seen. Instead, her eyes shone with pride and admiration. It was a look Marcus hadn't expected, support from someone who had once mocked him, but it steadied his nerves. Taking a deep breath, he sat down at the gleaming black Steinway piano, its polished surface reflecting the warm glow of the stage lights. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy with anticipation. Marcus began with Liszt's La Campanella, a piece known for its technical complexity and dazzling runs. His fingers moved across the keys with precision and grace, each note ringing out clear and resonant. But what set his performance apart wasn't just his technical skill, it was the emotion behind every keystroke. The melody danced through the air, playful yet profound, capturing the essence of triumph over struggle. As the cascading notes filled the hall, the audience leaned forward in their seats, completely captivated. When the final chord of La Campanella faded, there was a brief pause before the crowd erupted into cheers. But Marcus wasn't done. He transitioned seamlessly into Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the very piece that had first revealed his hidden talent. This time, however, he played it differently, with even more depth and vulnerability. Each note seemed to carry the weight of his past, the dreams he'd chased, the hardships he'd endured, and the quiet resilience that had kept him going. Tears glistened in the eyes of many listeners, including Evelyn, who clasped her hands tightly to keep them from trembling. For the final piece, Marcus chose something unexpected, a lesser-known composition by Debussy titled Clair de Lune. It was a gentle, dreamlike melody that painted pictures of moonlit nights and quiet reflection. As he played, the music seemed to wrap around the audience like a comforting embrace. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, while others exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the magic unfolding before them. By the time the last note lingered in the air, the entire hall was spellbound. When Marcus finally lifted his hands from the keys, the room remained silent for several seconds, a testament to the impact of his performance. Then, slowly, one person began to clap. Another joined in, then another, until the entire hall erupted into a standing ovation. People cheered, whistled, and stamped their feet, refusing to let the moment end. Marcus rose from the bench, visibly moved, his eyes scanning the sea of faces before him. Many were strangers, but their expressions said everything: gratitude, respect, awe. Backstage after the performance, Marcus was greeted by an overwhelming wave of congratulations. Students hugged him, professors praised him, and even the usually stoic Dr. Langston wiped away a tear. Evelyn approached him last, holding out a bouquet of flowers she had hastily gathered from the lobby. "You did it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You reminded us all why we love music." But Marcus shook his head humbly. "No," he replied softly. "It's because of people like you that I found my way back to it." His words brought fresh tears to Evelyn's eyes, and for the first time, she realized how much they had both grown since that fateful evening in the recital hall. As Marcus accepted invitations to teach workshops, perform at other venues, and share his story, he knew this night would forever mark the beginning of a new chapter. What started as a moment of defiance had transformed into something far greater, a reminder that true artistry isn't about fame or wealth, but about touching hearts and inspiring others to see the world differently. And in that packed concert hall, surrounded by people who now saw him not as a janitor but as a musician, Marcus finally felt whole again. Evelyn Harper was the kind of person who seemed to walk through life with an invisible crown resting on her head. The daughter of a billionaire philanthropist, she had grown up in a world where luxury and privilege were as natural as breathing. Her family's sprawling estate, private jets, and connections to the most elite circles ensured that Evelyn never wanted for anything. But it wasn't just her wealth that set her apart. It was her undeniable talent at the piano. From the moment Evelyn first sat at a keyboard as a child, it was clear she was destined for greatness. By the age of 12, she was winning local competitions. By 16, she was performing at international venues. Now, at 19, she was one of the brightest stars at the Academy, known not only for her technical brilliance, but also for her ability to captivate audiences with her performances. Yet, despite her undeniable skill, Evelyn carried herself with an air of arrogance that made her both admired and resented by her peers. Her presence commanded attention wherever she went. She walked with purpose, her designer dresses flowing behind her like royalty entering a throne room. Her sharp features, high cheekbones, piercing blue eyes, and perfectly styled blonde hair only added to her regal aura. When Evelyn spoke, people listened, or at least pretended to, even if her words often came across as cutting or condescending. To many, she was untouchable, someone whose success placed her above criticism. That evening, Evelyn found herself alone in one of the Academy's grand recital halls, practicing for an upcoming competition. The room was dimly lit, save for a single spotlight illuminating the gleaming black Steinway piano before her. It was her favorite instrument, its polished surface reflecting the soft glow like liquid silk. For Evelyn, this piano wasn't just an object. It was an extension of herself, a sacred vessel through which she expressed her artistry. As her fingers glided over the keys, she played with fierce concentration, each note precise and deliberate. Around her, the silence was absolute, broken only by the haunting melody spilling from the piano. Lost in the music, Evelyn barely noticed when Marcus entered the room, pushing his clinging cart quietly so as not to disturb her. He moved methodically, dusting picture frames and straightening chairs, trying to remain invisible. But fate had other plans. At one point, Marcus approached the piano bench to wipe down its glossy surface. As he leaned closer, his sleeve accidentally brushed against the edge of the piano. The sound of fabric grazing wood was faint, almost imperceptible. But to Evelyn, it might as well have been a thunderclap. She stopped mid-note, her hands freezing above the keys. Slowly, she turned her head toward Marcus, her expression darkening. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice cold and sharp. Marcus froze, his rag still in hand. "Do you have any idea how much this piano costs? People like you shouldn't even be near something this valuable." Her words hung heavy in the air, laced with disdain. Marcus opened his mouth to apologize, but Evelyn cut him off. "You probably don't even know what real music sounds like," she scoffed, her tone dripping with mockery. "This isn't some cheap toy you can just touch whenever you feel like it. This is serious business, for professionals, not janitors." Each word felt like a dagger, striking deeper than Evelyn could have imagined. Marcus lowered his gaze, his cheeks burning with shame. He muttered a quiet apology and stepped back, retreating to the far corner of the room. But as he watched Evelyn resume playing, something stirred within him, a flicker of defiance mixed with a pang of longing. The music she produced was undeniably beautiful, yet it lacked a certain depth, a rawness that only comes from lived experience. And though Evelyn didn't realize it yet, her cruel dismissal would soon lead to a revelation that would leave everyone, including herself, utterly astonished. In the heart of a bustling city stood a prestigious music academy, known for producing some of the finest musicians in the world. Its grand halls were filled with the sounds of violins, flutes, and pianos, echoing through marble corridors lined with golden-framed portraits of famous composers. Among the many people who kept this institution running smoothly was Marcus, a quiet and unassuming janitor in his late 40s. With his weathered face, calloused hands, and faded uniform, Marcus blended seamlessly into the background, almost invisible to those around him. Marcus had worked at the academy for over a decade, spending his days mopping floors, dusting shelves, and ensuring everything looked pristine. He arrived early each morning before the sun rose and left long after the last student had gone home. Despite his hard work, few people paid attention to him. To most, he was just the janitor, someone whose job was to clean up after them. Some students barely acknowledged his presence, while others treated him with thinly veiled disdain, as if his role made him less worthy of respect. But what no one realized was that beneath Marcus's humble exterior lay a man with a rich inner world. His eyes often lingered on the instruments scattered throughout the building. The gleaming violins, the polished trumpets, and especially the grand pianos that seemed to command attention in every practice room. There was a sadness in his gaze, a longing for something lost. Though he never spoke of it, Marcus carried a secret, a past he had locked away deep inside. Years ago, Marcus had been a gifted musician himself. As a young man, he dreamed of becoming a concert pianist, pouring hours into practicing scales, arpeggios, and complex pieces by Chopin and Rachmaninoff. His teachers had praised his talent, predicting a bright future for him. But life had other plans. A series of misfortunes, a family emergency, mounting debts, and eventually an injury to his hand during a part-time construction job, forced him to give up his dreams. Music, once his greatest joy, became a painful reminder of what could have been. Now, Marcus spent his days surrounded by the very things he loved but couldn't touch. The sight of students effortlessly playing melodies on expensive instruments sometimes stirred emotions he struggled to suppress. Yet he remained patient and kind, never letting bitterness creep into his demeanor. He found solace in the quiet moments when the academy emptied out, allowing him to walk among the pianos and imagine what might have been. One chilly evening, as Marcus polished the windows overlooking the courtyard, he heard faint piano notes drifting from one of the recital halls. Curious, he wandered closer, drawn to the sound. Inside, he saw Evelyn Harper, the Academy's star pupil, seated at a magnificent Steinway piano. Her fingers danced across the keys with practiced precision, filling the air with a piece so beautiful it took his breath away. For a moment, Marcus forgot himself, transfixed by the music. But when Evelyn glanced up and caught him staring, her expression turned cold. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply, her tone dripping with superiority. Before Marcus could respond, she added, "Don't even think about touching my piano. People like you shouldn't be anywhere near something this valuable." Her words stung, not because they were unexpected, but because they hit too close to home. Marcus nodded silently and stepped back, retreating into the shadows once more. Little did anyone know, this seemingly insignificant encounter would set off a chain of events that would change everything. For both Marcus and Evelyn. Evelyn's harsh words lingered in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his rag still clutched in his hand, feeling smaller than he ever had before. The weight of her disdain pressed down on him, not because it was new, but because it struck a nerve buried deep within. For years, he had endured similar treatment, silently swallowing insults and brushing them aside. But this time felt different. This time, something inside him stirred. As Evelyn resumed playing, her fingers dancing across the keys with practiced ease, Marcus slowly retreated to the corner of the room. He leaned against the wall, watching her with a mixture of sadness and frustration. Her performance was flawless, technically perfect, but there was an emptiness to it, a lack of soul that only someone who truly understood music could detect. To Marcus, it sounded polished but hollow, like a beautiful painting missing its colors. The melody swirled around him, stirring memories he had long tried to suppress. He remembered the countless hours spent practicing as a young man, the way his heart would race when he mastered a difficult passage, the thrill of performing in front of an audience that hung onto every note. Music had once been his lifeblood, the thing that gave him purpose. And now, here he was, reduced to being mocked for simply touching the very instrument that had once defined him. A spark of defiance began to grow within Marcus. It started small, like the faintest whisper, but quickly grew louder, urging him to act. What did Evelyn know about struggle? About pouring your soul into something only to have it ripped away? She played beautifully, yes, but her music lacked the depth that came from pain, loss, and resilience. Could she understand what it meant to create beauty out of hardship? When Evelyn finally paused to flip through her sheet music, Marcus made his decision. His hands trembled slightly as he approached the piano, his steps slow and deliberate. Though fear gnawed at him, he couldn't let this moment pass. Not now. Not after everything he'd been through. Evelyn glanced up sharply as she noticed him nearing the piano. "What are you doing?" she snapped, her tone icy. "I told you to stay away." Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second, then met her gaze steadily. "Just 1 minute," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "That's all I'm asking." For a brief moment, Evelyn looked taken aback by his boldness. She opened her mouth to protest, but something in Marcus's expression stopped her. There was a quiet determination in his eyes, a resolve that demanded respect. Reluctantly, she stepped aside, folding her arms across her chest as if daring him to make a fool of himself. Marcus took a deep breath and sat down on the bench, his calloused hands hovering above the keys. The cool smoothness of the ivory felt foreign yet familiar, like reuniting with an old friend after years apart. Closing his eyes, he let the first notes flow from his fingertips. Soft, hesitant at first, but soon gaining strength and confidence. It was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece he had memorized decades ago and never forgotten. As the melody unfolded, the room seemed to transform. The tension in the air dissolved, replaced by a haunting beauty that filled every corner. Each note carried emotion, longing, sorrow, hope, woven together into a tapestry of sound that spoke directly to the soul. Evelyn stared at Marcus, her jaw slack with disbelief. This wasn't just some amateur fumbling at the keys. This was mastery. Raw, unfiltered, and achingly real. For the first time in her life, she found herself unable to look away or interrupt. Whatever she had expected from the janitor, it wasn't this. And so, in that quiet recital hall, Marcus began to reclaim a part of himself he thought he'd lost forever. Little did he know, his impromptu performance was about to change not only his own life, but also the lives of everyone who heard it, including Evelyn herself. Word of Marcus's extraordinary performance spread like wildfire through the academy. By the next morning, it seemed as though everyone, from first-year students to senior faculty members, was talking about the janitor who had stunned them all with his hidden talent. Social media buzzed with posts from those fortunate enough to have witnessed the recital, sharing snippets of their reactions and even grainy recordings of the impromptu concert. The hashtag Marcus the Maestro began trending locally, drawing attention not only within the academy, but also from music enthusiasts outside its walls. Evelyn, now deeply moved by Marcus's story and determined to make amends for her earlier behavior, took charge of ensuring he received the recognition he deserved. She used her influence, not out of arrogance this time, but out of genuine admiration, to rally support for a special event. "We're going to give him the platform he deserves," she announced during a meeting with professors and student leaders. "This isn't just about Marcus. It's about reminding ourselves why we love music in the first place." Plans quickly came together for an exclusive showcase titled Rediscovered Melodies. It would be held in the Academy's Grand Concert Hall, a venue usually reserved for world-renowned artists and graduating seniors. Posters featuring a simple yet striking image of a piano with the words, "From Silence to Symphony," were plastered across campus, generating excitement among students and faculty alike. Evelyn personally oversaw every detail, from arranging seating charts to coordinating with the Academy's administration to ensure Marcus felt comfortable and respected throughout the process. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself at the center of unexpected attention. Students who had once ignored or dismissed him now approached him with shy smiles and heartfelt compliments. Some asked if he'd consider giving private lessons, while others simply wanted to thank him for inspiring them. At first, Marcus was overwhelmed by the sudden change in dynamics, unsure how to navigate this newfound respect. But over time, he began to embrace it, finding joy in connecting with people on a deeper level than ever before. The professors, too, treated him differently. They invited him to sit in on masterclasses, not as a spectator, but as a guest of honor whose insights could enrich the learning experience. One particularly poignant moment occurred when Dr. Langston, the head of the piano department, handed Marcus a leather-bound scorebook. "For old time's sake, and new ones," he said warmly, patting Marcus on the shoulder. Inside were handwritten notes and annotations, a gift meant to reignite Marcus's passion for teaching and performing. As the date of the showcase approached, Evelyn worked tirelessly to prepare Marcus for the big night. She helped him select pieces that showcased his unique style, a mix of classical favorites and lesser-known works that resonated with his personal journey. Together, they spent hours rehearsing in the same recital hall where it had all begun. Though Evelyn initially struggled to keep up with his advanced techniques, she didn't mind. Watching Marcus play reminded her of why she had fallen in love with music in the first place, its ability to transcend barriers and unite people. On the day of the event, the atmosphere was electric. The concert hall was packed, with standing room only for latecomers. Dignitaries, critics, and alumni filled the rows alongside students and staff, all eager to witness what promised to be a historic evening. Backstage, Marcus paced nervously, tugging at the collar of the suit Evelyn had insisted he wear. "You've got this," she whispered, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "Just play from your heart. That's what makes you unforgettable." When the lights dimmed and Marcus stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. For a man who had spent years blending into the background, the spotlight felt both terrifying and exhilarating. As he sat down at the gleaming grand piano, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let his fingers find the keys. What followed wasn't just a performance. It was a testament to resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of music to heal and inspire. In the weeks that followed the gala, Marcus's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. Offers poured in from every direction. Invitations to perform at prestigious venues, requests for interviews, and even proposals to record an album. Music critics hailed him as a rediscovered genius, praising not only his technical skill, but also the raw emotion he brought to each performance. Yet, despite the growing attention, Marcus remained grounded. He politely declined most of the extravagant opportunities, choosing instead to stay close to the Academy, the place where his journey had begun anew. For Marcus, teaching became his true calling. The professors welcomed him into the faculty with open arms, offering him a position as an adjunct instructor. At first, he hesitated, unsure if he was qualified to guide young musicians who looked up to him with wide-eyed admiration. But Evelyn, ever persistent, convinced him otherwise. "You don't need fancy degrees or titles to inspire people," she told him. "All you need is passion, and yours is contagious." Marcus quickly proved to be a natural teacher. Unlike some instructors who focused solely on technique, Marcus emphasized the importance of storytelling through music. "Every note has a soul," he would say during his classes. "Your job isn't just to play it, it's to bring it to life." His students adored him, not only for his wisdom, but also for his kindness and humility. Many said they felt more connected to their instruments after working with him, as though he had unlocked something within them they didn't know existed. Evelyn, too, underwent a profound transformation. Her encounter with Marcus had forced her to confront her own arrogance and rethink what it meant to be a musician. She began practicing with a renewed sense of purpose, no longer chasing perfection for its own sake, but striving to infuse her performances with authenticity and emotion. Under Marcus's guidance, she learned to embrace vulnerability, allowing herself to make mistakes and grow from them. Their relationship evolved into a deep friendship built on mutual respect, with Evelyn often referring to Marcus as her greatest teacher. The academy itself benefited immensely from Marcus's presence. Enrollment numbers surged as word spread about the janitor-turned-maestro, whose story inspired countless aspiring musicians. Fundraisers organized in his honor raised enough money to establish a scholarship fund for students from underprivileged backgrounds, a cause close to Marcus's heart. Talent shouldn't be limited by circumstances, he explained when asked why he supported the initiative. Everyone deserves a chance to shine. As months turned into years, Marcus continued to balance teaching with occasional performances. Though he no longer sought the limelight, he accepted select invitations to play at charity events and community concerts, using his platform to give back to those in need. His modesty endeared him to everyone he met, earning him a reputation not just as a brilliant musician, but as a genuinely good person. One evening, as Marcus walked through the now familiar halls of the academy, he paused outside the recital hall where it had all begun. The grand piano sat silently beneath the soft glow of the spotlight, waiting patiently for the next performer. Smiling to himself, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come since that fateful night. What started as a moment of defiance had blossomed into a second chance at life, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope can emerge when we least expect it. And so, Marcus's story became legend, a testament to the power of resilience, humility, and the universal language of music. It served as a beacon of inspiration for anyone who dared to dream, proving that greatness isn't defined by wealth or status, but by the courage to share one's gifts with the world. For Marcus, the janitor who once hid his talent, there was no greater reward than knowing he had touched lives, not just through his music, but through the quiet strength of his character.